What if the one thing connecting you to a past you never knew was the very key to a future you could never imagine? For one waitress, struggling to keep her head above water, a single silver locket worn around her neck was about to change everything. This is a story about a long-lost secret, a test of character that could shatter a person, and a revelation so powerful it would bring a billionaire to his knees. The clatter of plates and the low hum of conversation were the soundtrack to Alara's life. In the worn-down vinyl booth of the Greasy Spoon Diner, she moved with an economy of motion born from exhaustion. Each refilled coffee cup, each wiped-down table, was one small step toward paying the ever-growing medical bills for the only mother she had ever known. Sarah, her adoptive mom, was fading in a state-run nursing home, and the weight of it pressed down on Alara's shoulders day and night. Her only comfort, her only link to the mystery of her own beginning, was the small, tarnished silver locket that never left her neck. It had been with her when she was found, a nameless infant left on the steps of a fire station 24 years ago. One rainy Tuesday, the bell above the diner door chimed, admitting a presence that felt entirely out of place. A man in a flawlessly tailored suit, his face etched with a permanent storm of wealth and sorrow, stepped inside. He was followed by an elderly woman, elegant and frail, who leaned heavily on his arm. They took a booth in the corner, and Alara approached, notepad in hand. As she leaned in to ask for their order, the locket swung forward from beneath her uniform. The old woman's eyes, cloudy with age, suddenly sharpened to a piercing focus. Her breath hitched. A trembling, wrinkled hand reached out, not quite touching the locket. "That?" she whispered, her voice a fragile crackle of disbelief. "Where did you get that?" The man, Alistair Vance, a name synonymous with corporate empires and cold-blooded acquisitions, placed a steadying hand on his mother's arm. "Mother, please. It's just a piece of jewelry." But Eleanor Vance shook her head, tears welling. Her gaze was locked on Alara, pleading and accusatory all at once. "No," she insisted, her voice gaining a desperate strength. "I would know it anywhere. That locket. It belonged to my daughter." Alistair's expression hardened, a mask of impatience settling over his features as he tried to quiet his mother. He saw the scene they were causing, the other patrons turning to stare. For him, it was an inconvenience, a public display of his mother's age-addled grief. For Alara, the world had just tilted on its axis. She clutched the locket, the familiar cold metal suddenly feeling like a brand against her skin. "Ma'am," Alara said softly, her own voice trembling. I've had this my whole life." Alistair sighed, a sound of profound weariness. He pulled out his wallet, extracting several $100 bills and placing them on the table. "My apologies for the disturbance," he said, his tone clipped and dismissive. "My mother has not been well. She gets confused." He began to help her up, intent on making a swift exit. But Eleanor wouldn't move. She kept her eyes fixed on Alara, a lifetime of sorrow pouring from them. "Lilia," she whispered, the name hanging in the air like a ghost. "Alistair, you must see. It has the little bird engraved on the back. The one you designed." Alistair froze. He turned his head slowly, his gaze now falling on the locket with a new, terrifying intensity. He looked from the locket to Alara's face, searching her features as if trying to solve an impossible puzzle. He saw her wide, honest eyes, the exhaustion that couldn't quite extinguish a quiet resilience. He saw a young woman who was not a threat, but a mystery. "Stay," he commanded Alara, his voice low but carrying the unmistakable weight of authority. Then, to his mother, he spoke more gently. "We will stay." He settled back into the booth, the air thick with unspoken questions. He gestured for Alara to sit opposite them, an unprecedented act in the diner's history. "Tell me," Alistair Vance said, his voice stripped of its earlier coldness, replaced by a raw, desperate curiosity. "Tell me everything you know about that necklace." Alara sat, her server's apron feeling like a costume. She told them her story. The fire station, the orphanage, the kind woman named Sarah who had adopted her and given her a life, however humble. She explained that the locket was her only possession from that time, the sole artifact of her unknown origins. When she finished, a heavy silence fell over the table. Alistair stared at the locket, his mind racing. He remembered the day he'd given it to his wife, Lilia. He'd sketched the design himself, a tiny songbird in flight, a symbol of the freedom and joy she brought into his cloistered world. She had been pregnant with their daughter, Amelia, and her happiness had been radiant. Then came the crash, the fire, the phone call that had shattered his universe. Police had told him there were no survivors. Lilia and his infant daughter, gone in an instant. For 24 years, that had been the immutable, soul-crushing truth. He looked at Alara again. It was impossible. Coincidence. And yet, the locket was identical. He made a decision. "I want to buy it from you," he said, his voice carefully neutral. Alara's hand instinctively covered the piece of metal. "I'm sorry, sir. It's not for sale. I will give you $50,000. Her eyes widened, but she shook her head. "No. 100,000. Sir," she said, her voice gaining a quiet strength that surprised him. "This locket is the only thing I have from my parents. It's a part of me. It's priceless." Her refusal struck him more than any acceptance would have. It wasn't greed motivating her. It was sentiment, a connection to a past he had thought was buried forever. The cynicism that had been his armor for 2 decades began to crack. Marcus, his nephew, would have called this girl an opportunist. But Alistair saw something else in her unwavering gaze. Integrity. "Forgive me," he said, the apology sounding foreign on his tongue. That was crass. He paused, formulating a new plan. "I will not ask for the locket, but I will ask for your time. Come to my office tomorrow morning. Vance Tower. 10 o'clock. Let my people examine it. Let us find out where it came from. If you do this for me, I will see to it that your mother's medical expenses are taken care of." It was an offer that felt like a lifeline and a trap all at once. To step into the world of Alistair Vance was to step into another reality. But the look in his mother's eyes, and the desperate hope blooming in her own heart, left her with no other choice. "I'll be there," she said. The next morning, Alara stood before Vance Tower, a monolith of glass and steel that seemed to scrape the heavens. It was a monument to a world so far removed from her own that it felt like a foreign country. Her simple dress and worn cardigan seemed inadequate, and she clutched the strap of her purse like a shield. Inside, the lobby was a cavern of marble and hushed efficiency. When she gave her name at the security desk, the guard's eyes flickered with recognition. She was expected. An express elevator whisked her to the penthouse floor. The doors opened directly into Alistair Vance's office, a space larger than her entire apartment, with a floor-to-ceiling window offering a godlike view of the city below. Alistair stood by the window, his back to her. Eleanor was seated in a plush armchair, her demeanor much calmer than the day before, though her eyes followed Alara's every move with an unnerving intensity. "Thank you for coming," Alistair said, turning to face her. He gestured to a chair. Alara sat, her heart pounding. She carefully unclasped the locket and handed it to him. He took it with a reverence that startled her, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he turned it over and over. He traced the engraving of the songbird on the back, his thumb lingering on the tiny, intricate detail. "It was a gift," Eleanor said, her voice soft but clear. "For my daughter-in-law, Lilia. Alistair gave it to her the week their daughter was born. We were all so happy." Her voice broke, and she looked away, lost in a memory. "My wife, our daughter Amelia, they were in a car accident 24 years ago," Alistair stated, his voice flat, stripped of all emotion as if reciting a historical fact. "I was told they were both gone. The car was destroyed by a fire. There was nothing left to identify." Alara listened, a cold dread washing over her. I don't understand," she stammered. "How could I have it?" "That is the question that has kept me awake all night," Alistair replied. his gaze finally meeting hers. My security team is already looking into the records from the hospital, the police reports from the accident. Everything. He paused, weighing his next words. There is a possibility, a 1 in a billion chance, that there was a mistake. Just then, the office door opened and a young man in an impeccably tailored suit strode in. He was handsome, with a confident smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Uncle Alastair, I was just reviewing the quarterly reports and... He stopped short, his eyes landing on Alara. His smile tightened. Marcus, this is Alara, Alastair said. My nephew, Marcus Thorne. Marcus extended a hand to Alara, his grip firm and cool. A pleasure, he said, his tone suggesting the opposite. He looked from Alara to the locket in Alastair's hand, and a flicker of understanding and alarm crossed his face. What's all this, uncle? Don't tell me you're still entertaining Mother's fanciful notions from yesterday. That's enough, Marcus, Alastair warned. But Marcus pressed on, his voice laced with a patronizing concern. He turned his charm on Alara. I'm sure you have a very compelling story, miss, and a locket that looks remarkably like one my aunt used to own. But you have to understand, my uncle is a man who has suffered a great loss. He's vulnerable to suggestion. Alara flinched as if struck. I'm not trying to suggest anything, she said, her voice quiet but firm. Your grandmother asked me a question, and I answered it. Your uncle made me an offer, and I accepted. Marcus chuckled. A dry, unpleasant sound. An offer? I'm sure he did. He looked at Alastair. Uncle, be sensible. This is a classic con. A waitress with a sob story about her sick mother and a conveniently found piece of jewelry? Is practically a script. You need to let your security handle this and send her on her way before you get hurt. The words were poison, skillfully designed to plant seeds of doubt. Alastair's face, which had shown a flicker of hope, clouded over with his habitual suspicion. He looked at Alara, the question hanging in the air between them. Was she an opportunist? Was he a fool, desperate to believe in a ghost? Marcus is the presumed heir to the Vance fortune, Alastair explained to Alara, his voice regaining some of its coldness, as if to test her reaction. He has a vested interest in protecting this family from deception. I understand, Alara said, meeting Alastair's gaze without wavering. She stood up, her dignity a fragile shield against Marcus's cynicism. I didn't ask for any of this. If you think I'm lying, then there's nothing more to say. I'll go. She turned to leave, but Eleanor's voice stopped her. No, wait. The old woman struggled to her feet, her eyes pleading with her son. Alastair, don't listen to him. Look at her. Just look at her eyes. They're Lilia's eyes. The initial investigation yielded nothing. The private investigators Alastair hired were the best in the world. But the trail was cold. The orphanage where Alara had spent the first few months of her life had been shut down for over a decade, its records lost in a fire. The police report on the Vance accident was concise and brutal. 2 fatalities, no survivors. Seemed Marcus was right. It was all a tragic, painful coincidence. Alastair grew more distant, the flicker of hope extinguished by the cold wave of reality. He treated Alara with a polite but formal courtesy, fulfilling his promise to cover Sarah's medical bills. But the emotional connection had been severed. He was a man retreating back into his fortress of grief. Marcus, meanwhile, was relentless. He made it his mission to discredit Alara, not just to Alastair, but to the few staff members who were aware of her presence. He would make snide remarks in her hearing, questioning her motives, her background, her honesty. He painted her as a predator, circling his grieving uncle. The weight of the suspicion was crushing, and Alara felt herself starting to wilt under the pressure. The opulent penthouse felt more like a prison than a palace. Desperate for a familiar comfort, Alara went to visit Sarah. Her adoptive mother was housed in a new, private facility, a sun-drenched room with attentive nurses, all thanks to Alastair's money. But the sterile luxury felt hollow. Sarah was having a rare lucid day, her mind sharp and clear. Alara sat by her bedside, holding her frail hand, and poured out the whole unbelievable story. The diner, the Vances, the locket, and the cruel accusations. Sarah listened patiently, her gaze thoughtful. When Alara finished, her voice thick with unshed tears, Sarah squeezed her hand. "The pouch," she said, her voice a reedy whisper. "What pouch?" Alara asked, confused. "When the fireman brought you to me, you were wrapped in a blanket. The locket was around your neck. But there was something else. A small, worn leather pouch. He said it was found with you." Alara's heart began to beat faster. "What was in it?" "I don't know," Sarah admitted. "It was tied shut, and there was a note pinned to it. It said, 'Do not open unless her life depends upon it.' I always thought it was just some sentimental trinket from your birth mother. A lock of hair, perhaps. I respected her wishes. I put it in my safety deposit box all those years ago, and, with the sickness, I forgot all about it." A jolt went through Alara. A sealed pouch. A note. It wasn't just the locket. There was more. "Sarah, where is the key?" Alara asked, her voice trembling with a desperate, burgeoning hope. The key to the safety deposit box felt like the key to her entire life. Alara retrieved it and rushed to the bank, her hands shaking so badly she could barely sign her name. The teller brought out the long-forgotten metal box. Inside, beneath faded photographs of Alara as a child and Sarah's modest savings bonds, was a small, cracked leather pouch, tied with a faded ribbon. She took it back to her small apartment, a place that felt more like home than the gilded cage of Vance Tower. With trembling fingers, she untied the ribbon. Inside was not a trinket, but a letter. A single sheet of paper, folded and sealed with wax. The paper was yellowed with age, the seal unbroken for 24 years. This was it. The answer. She put the letter in her purse and headed straight for Vance Tower, a renewed sense of purpose coursing through her. But as she stepped out of the taxi, a sleek black car pulled up beside her. The window rolled down to reveal Marcus Thorne. "Get in," he said. It wasn't a request. Hesitantly, she complied. The car smelled of leather and money. "I know what you have," he said, his charming facade gone, replaced by a cold, calculating intensity. "My sources at the nursing home are very thorough. A forgotten pouch, a mysterious letter. It's all very dramatic." He didn't drive anywhere. He simply sat there, the engine idling, creating a bubble of pressurized silence. He reached into his jacket and pulled out not a weapon, but a checkbook. He signed his name with a flourish and handed the blank check to her. "This is your final test, Alara," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "You can be a fool or you can be a rich woman. Name your price. 1,000,000? 5? 10? Enough to give your mother the life of a queen. Enough so you never have to serve another cup of greasy coffee as long as you live. All you have to do is give me that letter, walk away, and never contact my family again. Let my uncle grieve in peace. It's the merciful thing to do." Alara stared at the blank check. It was a tangible solution to every single problem she had. The debt, the worry, the exhaustion. It was an escape. She could take it and no one would ever know. Sarah would be safe. She would be secure. But she thought of Eleanor Vance's tear-filled eyes. She thought of the flicker of hope she'd seen in Alistair's guarded expression. And she thought of the unknown woman who had pinned a note to a pouch, a desperate plea across the decades. This wasn't about mercy for Alistair. It was about silencing the truth for Marcus's own gain. Her integrity, forged in years of quiet struggle, was not for sale. She looked Marcus directly in the eye, her own gaze clear and unyielding. She pushed the check back toward him. "The truth isn't for sale, Marcus." His face contorted in a brief flash of fury before settling back into a cold sneer. "You sentimental fool," he hissed. "You'll regret this." "No," she said, opening the car door. "I don't think I will." She left him sitting there in his expensive car and walked into Vance Tower, not as a supplicant, but as a woman on a mission. She bypassed the receptionists and took the elevator straight to the penthouse. She found Alistair standing by the window, staring out at the city, looking more lost and alone than ever. Eleanor sat nearby, quietly knitting, the click of her needles the only sound in the vast room. "I have something," Elara said, her voice clear and strong. Alistair turned, his expression weary. "The investigators found nothing, Elara. It's over." It was a false hope. "It's not over," she insisted, walking toward him. She held out the sealed letter. "My adoptive mother kept this for me. It was with me the day I was found." Alistair looked at the ancient, sealed paper, his skepticism warring with a desperate curiosity. He took it from her, his fingers tracing the brittle edges. With a deep breath, he broke the wax seal that had held its secret for nearly a quarter of a century. He unfolded the single sheet of paper and began to read. The handwriting was weak, the ink faded, but the words were a bombshell that detonated in the silent office. It was a deathbed confession from a nurse named Helen. "To whoever finds this child," the letter began, "I am a coward and a sinner, but I could not let her be forgotten. I was a nurse on duty the night of the Vance accident. The mother, Lilia, was gone instantly, but the baby was alive. I pulled her from the wreckage myself. She didn't have a scratch on her." Alistair let out a choked gasp, his hand flying to his mouth. Eleanor had stopped knitting, her eyes wide with shock. "My own baby had died just a week before," the letter continued. "In my grief, in my madness, I did a terrible thing. I told the paramedics there were no survivors. I took the baby home. I named her Chloe. For a few months, I pretended she was mine. But God is not mocked. I was diagnosed with a cancer that moved with terrible speed. I knew I was dying. I couldn't bear to confess my crime, and I couldn't bear for this precious child to be lost in the system. So I am leaving her where a kind soul might find her. Her name is not Chloe. Her name is Amelia Vance. Her mother's locket is around her neck. Please, forgive me, and please love her." The letter slipped from Alistair's numb fingers. He stared at Elara, but he wasn't seeing a waitress anymore. He was seeing his daughter. He saw Lilia's eyes, his own stubborn chin, a ghost of a family he thought was lost to ashes and memory. The grief, the joy, the shock. It was too much to bear. The powerful, unbreakable billionaire crumpled. Alistair Vance fell to his knees, his body racked with sobs that came from a place of 24 years of buried pain. "Amelia," he wept, the name a ragged prayer. "My daughter." Elara, Amelia, knelt in front of him, her own tears flowing freely, and placed a hand on his shoulder. In that moment, all the wealth and power vanished, leaving only a father and a daughter, finding each other across an impossible chasm of time and tragedy. The heavy office door swung open, and Marcus strode in, a triumphant smirk on his face. "Well, Uncle, I trust you've finally come to your senses about this little—" He stopped dead, his eyes taking in the scene. The letter on the floor, Alistair on his knees, Elara crying with him. The smirk vanished, replaced by pure, unadulterated panic. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice strained. Alistair rose slowly to his feet, his face transformed. The grief was still there, but it was now mingled with a white-hot rage. He looked at his nephew with eyes that could have melted steel. "You knew," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Knew what? I don't know what you're talking about. The woman is clearly a fraud." Marcus blustered, but the sweat beading on his forehead betrayed him. "My investigators may have hit a wall with the old records," Alistair said, his voice building in power. "But the letter gave them a new name to trace, Helen the nurse, and when they started digging into her past, they found a very interesting connection. Years ago, while handling the legal audit of my old family estate, you came across some of Helen's sealed medical records. You found out she had taken a child. You found out my Amelia might still be alive." Marcus's face went pale. "You didn't just fail to tell me," Alistair continued, taking a step forward. "You actively worked to hide her. The investigators just uncovered it. Payments from one of your shell corporations to the old administrator of the St. Jude's orphanage. Ensuring those records stayed lost, you buried my daughter, Marcus. You left her to struggle, to fight for every scrap. Also, you could protect your inheritance. Trapped and exposed, Marcus's desperation curdled into arrogant defiance. She was a nobody, he spat, his true nature finally revealed. A waitress in a greasy diner. You think I was going to let her waltz in and take everything I have worked my entire life for? She had a life. It was a perfectly fine life. She didn't need this. I did what was necessary to protect this family. To protect you. Protect me. Alistair's voice was a low growl. You let me grieve for a daughter who was alive. You let me live in a gray, empty world while my own flesh and blood was out there alone. You are not my family. He pointed a trembling finger toward the door. Get out. Security will escort you from the building. Your accounts will be frozen. Your name will be stripped from every Vance holding. You are nothing to me. Marcus stared, his face a mask of disbelief and fury, before two stone-faced security guards appeared and took him by the arms, dragging him from the room and from their lives forever. In the aftermath, justice was swift and absolute. Marcus Thorne was legally and financially excised from the Vance empire, his betrayal leaving him with nothing. The story became a quiet legend in the city's financial circles, a tale of greed and long overdue retribution. Amelia's first act was not to claim her fortune, but to claim her family. She moved Sarah to the finest medical facility in the country, a beautiful place with gardens and compassionate care, ensuring the woman who had raised her would live out her days in absolute comfort and dignity. The reunion between Amelia, her father, and her grandmother was a slow, beautiful process. They spent hours talking, sharing stories, filling in the 24-year gap with memories both real and imagined. Alistair showed her photographs of Lilia, and for the first time, Amelia saw her mother's smile. She learned she had her mother's eyes and her father's resilience. The hollow space in her heart, the one that had always wondered where she came from, was finally, completely full. Weeks later, Amelia stood with Alistair and Eleanor in the sun-drenched conservatory of the family estate. Her polished silver locket, once a symbol of a mysterious past, now rested against her chest as a testament to an incredible future. She was no longer Ilara the waitress, fighting to survive. She was Amelia Vance, a daughter who had been found, a woman who was finally home. The quiet dignity she had always possessed was now imbued with a newfound strength and purpose. She was not just an heiress. She was the keeper of a legacy of love that had refused to be extinguished. A life can be changed in an instant, by a chance encounter, a word of kindness, or a truth that refuses to stay buried. Integrity, when tested, proves to be a fortune far greater than any inheritance. How many other miracles are out there, waiting just beyond a door of doubt, ready to be unlocked by a simple act of faith? If this story of hope and reunion touched your heart, please like and share it with others. Subscribe for more inspirational stories that remind us that even in the darkest